Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 10 waiver wire targets for the 2020 fantasy football season. Of course, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about my waiver wire targets at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback position, also with a couple defenses sprinkled in at the end as a streaming option. Outside of that, we're talking about breakout performances and players that you can add to your roster, not only as handcuffs and potential depth plays, but guys that can perhaps, in the coming weeks, take over a large workload of their specific team, get targets, get opportunity, and lead to their ultimate success in fantasy football. So we're trying to target players that could eventually become upper tier guys that maybe you can start as a wide receiver 3, a potential starting running back, or a flex option in the coming weeks. Before we begin, I want to thank you guys for your incredible support. We are on our way to 34,000 subscribers. So if you have not yet already, click the subscribe button, join the community. Again, we're making 2020 fantasy football content here on the daily until the entirety of the season. Again, all the way till week 17, we'll be talking about fantasy football. So again, if you're interested, make sure you subscribe. Outside of that, down in the description of the video, we will have timestamps for those of you who are interested, looking for a specific player and me talking about them. Outside of that, while you're down in the description, you can find our community Discord link down there. Click on the link, join the community Discord. We're talking all things fantasy football there. Click the like button down below, comment down below as well for the algorithm. And outside of that, let's get into our Week 10 waiver wire targets. Starting off with the running back position, as you can see on screen, I wanted to go ahead and first and foremost talk about running backs, and specifically Mike Davis, because of the injury that just occurred to Christian McCaffrey. Now, for those of you who watched the Carolina Panthers almost beat the Kansas City Chiefs yesterday on Sunday, Sunday morning football, Sunday afternoon, just depends where you are. You will have noticed that in the fourth quarter, there were multiple shots in which the camera were looking at the Carolina Panthers sideline and specifically keying in on Christian McCaffrey. Off of just his face and his facial expressions, we could tell that there was a bit of discomfort. Obviously, then the medical crew started checking him out, started lifting his pads. It looked like it could potentially have been a rib injury, but as of right now, they're saying it's a shoulder injury. Could be, collarbone, clavicle, something of that extent. But either way, he is currently dealing with one. Matt Rule, the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, said he is day-to-day. This is why you do not drop players like Mike Davis immediately after your running back comes off of the IR and or an injury. That's why I wanted to go ahead and first and foremost say, yes, if Mike Davis is available in your league, you should for sure pick him up. Hopefully he's not. Hopefully everybody has stashed him and kept him on base, because if in fact you had dropped him, this could be a pretty big deal, as there's a 20-point running back out on the waiver like Mike Davis, because he's already proven to be very valuable. Outside of that, other players like Giovanni Bernard, Boston Scott, these are two guys that, in my opinion, because we are going to see the returns of Joe Mixon potentially, Miles Sanders potentially, and even Nick Chubb this upcoming week in Week 10, we have to keep an eye on a couple handcuffs. Of course, Nick Chubb doesn't have a handcuff. His name is Kareem Hunt. But keep an eye on these players, because, again, if you get too far away and you drop one of these players, it could hurt you ultimately. Now, let's not forget Christian McCaffrey yesterday had an incredible game. 18 carries, 69 yards, a rushing touchdown, 10 targets, 10 catches, 82 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown, all for 32.1 half PPR fantasy points. Either way, if in fact Mike Davis takes over, they play against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And again, he will get utilization in the passing game and will find himself some fantasy value. So Mike Davis is our number one. Number two is Wayne Gallman. He was the reality stone, because the reality of the situation this last weekend was, again, Devontae Freeman was out, and the consistency of the New York Giants running the ball has been a staple of their offense. And in the last 3 weeks, Wayne Gallman has found himself in the end zone. Just this past Sunday against the Washington football team, he had 14 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown, 2 targets, 1 reception for 9 receiving yards. Of course, there were a couple times in which they gave the ball to Alfred Morris and or Dion Lewis that maybe should have went to Wayne Gallman, and it definitely would have been, especially on a 4th and 1 carry. Dion Lewis isn't really the guy to plunge for that yard. Regardless, he still ended up having a great fantasy performance, 14.2 points. Now, if you look at it in a different perspective, if you go look at all the running backs that produced in Week 9 and how many points they put up in a half PPR scoring format, Wayne Gallman was among the top 7. I mean, there really were, I think he was maybe number 4 or 5, to be honest. There really weren't that many incredible performances outside of a Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey. Number 3 was James Robinson at 15.9 points. We have ourselves Wayne Gallman at 14 points. So again, he had himself a great performance. This upcoming week takes on the Philadelphia Eagles. He did that a couple weeks back, ended up playing well when Devontae Freeman went down. So again, Wayne Gallman continues to have himself some consistency and value in fantasy football. We have J.D. McKissic as our number 3 running back. Now, of course, Antonio Gibson is still in that backfield, still getting touches, but unfortunately, due to the injury to Kyle Allen, of course, dislocating that ankle, honestly, I don't know what it is about Washington football team quarterbacks, Alex Smith a couple years back, his entire leg situation, I honestly thought it was another one of these impactful injuries where it was just going to knock him out and maybe end his career. Thank goodness it was only a dislocated ankle. Kyle Allen out for the season, but will return next year, I'm assuming. But that being said, J.D. McKissic, when Alex Smith came into the game, was a different animal. Alex Smith is a check down junkie. He will always and forever not, pass the deep. He is going to pretty much be a Drew Brees, but to the next level. J.D. McKissic, for many of you who do not look at the stats, had 14 targets, 9 receptions for 65 receiving yards, 13.3 fantasy points against the New York Giants. So again, a ridiculous number of targets, receptions. If Alex Smith, which I'm assuming is going to be the starting quarterback this upcoming week, they play against Detroit, she'll be a pretty good pickup and play in a PPR. Most definitely in a half PPR, still has value. Duke Johnson's my number 4. Again, as of right now, David Johnson is dealing with the concussion protocol. Duke Johnson honestly looked like the better back. I haven't seen Duke Johnson play very often this year because, again, he's been dealing with his own injuries, especially early with the ankle. But yesterday against Jacksonville, had himself a pretty good game. 16 touches on the ground, only got 41 yards, but it's okay. Plunged in for a rushing touchdown. 4 targets, 4 catches, 32 receiving yards, 13.3 fantasy points. Ultimately had a great game. David Johnson maybe would have gotten to that number, but again, it wasn't looking great yesterday because he wasn't getting as much utilization early on. That being said, because it was a back and forth shootout, Duke Johnson, if he's the starter this week, because David Johnson's going to be out, they play against Cleveland. I like that matchup. It wasn't just a couple weeks back that Giovanni Bernard, the backup running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, had himself a pretty good game, catching a bunch of balls out of the backfield. Again, Duke Johnson could be a very valuable stash and play for this upcoming week. Moving on to our next prospect, we have number 5, Kallen Ballage. Now, you may be thinking, Andrew, wait, Kallen Ballage? Why are we talking about Kallen Ballage? Well, it actually has happened again. Another player has left the Adam Gase bubble, per se, and has thrived in another offense. I mean, we've seen it multiple times already. Ryan Tannehill thriving in the Tennessee Titans offense. Robbie Anderson thriving in the Carolina Panthers offense. We've seen 2 players leave Adam Gase in the last couple of years and benefit from it. And Kallen Ballage seems to be that next option because yesterday, Sunday afternoon against the Las Vegas Raiders, we had Justin Jackson, the starting running back of the Los Angeles Chargers, go down with a knee injury again. Here comes Kallen Ballage, 15 carries, 69 rushing yards, had a rushing touchdown, 2 catches on 3 targets for 15 receiving yards, 15.4 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. Kallen Ballage gets to take on his former team, the Miami Dolphins, this upcoming week. I think, again, if in fact Justin Jackson's out, Kallen Ballage looks like a far better back than we've ever seen him play as. So again, could have some value. The last option I wanted to mention is an actual Miami Dolphin in the opposite side of this matchup, is Matt Breida. Now again, Myles Gaskin's going to be out for potentially what they said 3 weeks. We've got 2 more weeks at least in that IR situation. The running back position for the Miami Dolphins is a bit of a mess. If Matt Breida is healthy with the hamstring, this is a guy that I still want to go ahead and pick up and potentially play because I do think he is the most talented running back on roster right now that is potentially going to be healthy. Again, Jordan Howard, 10 rushes for 19 yards and a touchdown. That is not going to do anything. Patrick Laird didn't get much. I know there was another running back that was running around getting majority of the touches and snaps, but again, nothing of significant value. So Matt Breida, if he's healthy, not a bad option. Those are our Week 10 running back targets. We move on to the wide receiver position. We start off with our number 1, Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel, for the last, 3 weeks, has been a consistent fantasy prospect and produced incredible numbers. Not only is he getting it done on the ground, in which, yesterday he had 3 carries for 18 rushing yards. Great numbers there. Even the week prior, on Thursday Night Football against the Falcons, had a rushing touchdown that he stole from Mike Davis. We saw Curtis Samuel pretty much, I want to say, annihilate all of the value that DJ Moore has ever had in this offense. It really looks like Curtis Samuel is the new DJ Moore to an extent. Now, Robbie Anderson's getting his touches, so is Christian McCaffrey, but Curtis Samuel, 9 targets, 9 receptions, 105 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown, 22.3 fantasy points. Again, he's doing this on a weekly basis at this point now. So this offense, they're definitely churning. They're getting more utilization out of Curtis Samuel. You're trying to get him the ball as much as they possibly can. He had 12 touches yesterday against Kansas City, and they really didn't have an answer for him and Teddy Bridgewater. So again, I think Curtis Samuel should be the number 1 wide receiver pickup this week going forward. Number 2 is Sterling Shepard. Now again, Sterling Shepard in the last couple weeks has seen great consistent target share. He's had a total of, and I quote, 26 total targets in the last 3 games. That's pretty good, to say the very least. That's over 8 per game. We'll take that, especially considering this offense is probably going to have to throw for majority of the game. It seems like Sterling Shepard is in line for a pretty good number of targets and opportunity. Also, Darius Slayton, a no-show yesterday. It's a pretty thing. I think, what was it? Austin Mack was the guy that was pretty much getting a lot of targets. I'm not too concerned about that. I do think that Sterling Shepard playing against the Philadelphia Eagles this week is another advantageous matchup. We just saw him 2 weeks back score against them and play well against them. So again, Sterling Shepard, not a bad option, and a guy that, as long as he's getting more and more utilization in this offense, staying healthy, I think he could have some great value. Number 3 is John Brown, a guy that a lot of us kind of gave up on. I myself gave up on because of the amount of injuries and the amount of times that he would start for my team and leave a dud performance in there because of the injury, forcing him to leave the game. Now, he's past that calf injury. He had a great game against the Seattle Seahawks, of course, because of the fact that this Buffalo Bills offense looked incredible. I mean, Josh Allen almost had just as, I think he had 4 total touchdowns and only 7 incompletions. Like, he was really on a different level, like 31 for 38 passing, something of that extent, was out of his mind. Obviously, John Brown's going to benefit from that. 11 targets, 8 receptions, 99 receiving yards, 13.9 points. This upcoming week takes on Arizona. That is a former team of his. Could be a little bit of a revenge game for John Brown. The last time he was in Arizona, from my recollection, he had a 1,000-yard receiving season with Carson Palmer. I could be incorrect, but that is what I remember just off the top of my head. I think John Brown, not a bad option going forward. Again, he's pretty much reestablished himself as the number 2. I know Gabriel Davis is still scoring. Of course, Stephon Diggs is in that offense, but John Brown could be of relevant value going forward. Speaking of relevant value, I do think that a Packers number 2 wide receiver could have value. Typically, in the last couple of years, we haven't seen it, but Allen Lazard seems to be the guy that has kind of shifted that. Now, he's coming back from being on the IR for about 4 to 6 weeks with a core muscle injury in which he had surgery on. This time around, he's going to be joining the team, and they have a very soft slate going ahead of them. Now, the question is going to be, how much is Allen Lazard going to contribute this upcoming week playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars? Of course, he is designated to return. I don't think that we can 100% say that he's going to hop in and play 80 to 90% of the snaps. I'm hoping he does. Hopefully he has an entire full week of practice so we don't have to worry about him. But again, anything that Robert Tonyan and or Marquez Valdes-Scantling has benefited from in the last couple weeks would have typically gone to Allen Lazard. We've seen him already this season in the absence of a guy like Devontae Adams on the team. Allen Lazard can step up and be a number 1 wide receiver for this offense, because if Aaron Rodgers is throwing you the ball, you're typically going to be improved because of that. Either way, I think Allen Lazard, not a bad option going forward. We move on to our number 5, Rashard Higgins, coming off of the bye week. Again, this team is going to be significantly improved. Of course, I know Baker is dealing with the COVID-19 situation. He is on the IR list. If Case Keenum is a quarterback, I don't mind that. They play against the Houston Texans. That secondary is awful. Jake Luton coming in and putting up a great day with 300-plus passing yards. So the question remains, what exactly can we expect from an offense that might not have Baker, might have a backup quarterback? Case Keenum, not a bad quarterback at all, especially considering he has experience with Kevin Stefanski in the Vikings organization. They're going to air it out. Again, they do get Nick Chubb back. That's going to help them, but it'll also help their play action. They'll also get Austin Hooper back. Their offensive guard that has been out for a couple of weeks, he will come back. So again, I do think that Rashard Higgins, even though a couple weeks back, week, was it 8? Didn't really kind of put up a performance that we could be proud of considering the weather conditions between the Cleveland Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders. I think Rashard Higgins is a guy that might be slept on and maybe dropped in the coming days. It could be picked up by yourself. Jalen Reagor is my number 6 again. The last time we saw Jalen Reagor play was prior to the bye week, week 8. Had himself a decent game. Again, he was coming off of the injured reserve. Should be fine. He was dealing with the UCL injury, in which pretty much his thumb was all busted. Again, he was dealing with a AC joint the earlier part of the preseason into the first couple games. So again, he's been banged up all season long. If in fact, Travis Fulgham is going to remain as the number 1 receiving option, which I expect him to do so, it's going to be between Greg Ward and Jalen Reagor as the number 2 receiving spot. Now, of course, Greg Ward is playing more snaps, especially when we look at the target share against the Dallas Cowboys. But again, Jalen Reagor is going to get more and more utilization. for those of you who are familiar with his college days, this guy has a burner. I mean, he is going to be able to take the top off of a defense and really dice up secondaries. I think he'll be able to take care of that and potentially show us what he's capable of against the Giants this upcoming week. So again, not a bad option to pick up. Richie James. So here's the thing. When all else was gone from the 49ers offense, in the idea that they had no starting quarterback, tight end, running backs, wide receivers, all of them were out. Even the left tackle was out. The question was going to be, who is going to benefit the most from, of course, this offense going down the field and throwing the ball? We thought maybe Ross Dwelley. A lot of people had the idea of Trent Taylor. I wasn't really on the board of that, but out of nowhere, Richie James has 13 targets, 9 catches for 184 receiving yards and a touchdown, having the number 1 wide receiver week of week 9. Had 28.9 half PPR points. This upcoming week takes on the New Orleans Saints. Again, I don't really think that secondary is the greatest, but if Richie James is going to garner as many targets as he did this past week, I think he definitely has value in a San Francisco-led offense. Tim Patrick's minor break coming off of the injury again. Had himself a good amount of targets. Again, Jerry Jeudy on the other side of the field is becoming what we expected him to become. I'm excited to see what he's going to be capable of next season, of course, when Courtland Sutton returns. That combination could be deadly. But again, Tim Patrick is serving as the number 2 wide receiver. Had himself 9 targets, 4 catches for 29 receiving yards and a touchdown. Surpassed himself 10.9 fantasy points. Love to see it. Plays against the Las Vegas Raiders this week with the antics of what Drew Lock is doing in the second half. Of course, the first half of Denver Bronco games are pretty slow. Hopefully Pat Shurmur can kind of pick that up and really give them some momentum early, but we are seeing so much garbage time from the Denver Broncos in the second half, specifically the fourth quarter, of course, that it is really just giving Drew Lock so much, extra juice. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, his receivers are getting so many more points. Like, KJ Hamler is a relevant option. Deshaun Hamilton, who hadn't played all year last week, was a relevant option because of the fact that they're scoring in bunches in the fourth quarter and really can't be stopped there. So again, not a bad option to go for a Tim Patrick kind of player. Our final option for the wide receiver position is David Moore. Now, I know the wide receiver position is relatively thin, and I didn't want to go ahead and just throw out a name in which you could hope that he plays well, but here's the thing that I found with David Moore. This season, though he has been relatively inconsistent, has put up 4 games of 12 plus fantasy points. Those 4 games, of course, he scored a touchdown. He had another game in which he had over 7 fantasy points. The question is, if in fact Russell Wilson is on this pace of surpassing 50 passing touchdowns, are there going to be players like a David Moore that are just going to be caught in the crossfire and just catch nearly 10 touchdowns because of their association with this offense? And I think the answer is yes. From what we've seen, of course, DK Metcalf is the number 1. Tyler Lockett is a number 2, but very, very volatile. Shows up and has incredible games or disappears for multiple weeks. I think there is a possibility that if David Moore could, get more and more reps, which he has, gotten more and more targets this past weekend, had himself a good amount of targets, it could ultimately lead to him being a relevant potential wide receiver 3 flex option in good passing matchups. I think the Rams matchup this week isn't a bad idea. Typically, Russell Wilson plays very well against them, and it's a higher scoring event between these 2 teams. So David Moore could benefit from it, but I just wanted to go ahead and throw his name out there. Again, as of right now, nearly averaging 10 points per week. So he's on that pace. We could end up see him, pretty much surpass that as the weeks progress, and he gets more and more utilization in this offense, of course. Okay, we move on to the tight end position, and we start off with our number 1, a guy that found the end zone. Again, the tight end position, if you find the end zone, you are going to be relevant. Eric Ebron. 6 total targets, 3 receptions, 22 receiving yards, hurdled over a defender to score a touchdown for 9.7 fantasy points. Plays against the Cincinnati Bengals. I've mentioned this multiple times. The Cincinnati Bengals give up the 3rd most points to opposing tight ends thus far this season in a half PPR scoring format. So again, if Eric Ebron is going to continue to benefit from this offense, continuing to give him the ball down in the red zone, then again, he will score and find himself some fantasy value. Again, this is 2 weeks in a row in which he's scoring, getting himself more and more acclimated in this offense and becoming more of a viable threat as the season progresses. Austin Hooper is our number 2. Again, he's coming off of appendicitis. They went ahead, they removed it, surgery. He should be fine going forward. The question is going to be, where exactly do we expect him to kind of get back to? They play against the Texans. I think that's a great matchup, prior to Austin Hooper leaving, 23 targets in the last 3 games, scoring 9.3 fantasy points per game. This is a guy that you should automatically be picking up and potentially starting going forward, because even in his absence, we've seen Harrison Bryant, David Njoku produce great fantasy weeks because, again, the tight end position is such a huge part of this Kevin Stefanski offense for the Cleveland Browns. Again, thinking back at what exactly the Minnesota Vikings did with their 2 tight end sets, they used some of the, I think, between the Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles last season, those are the 2 teams using the most 2 tight end sets in the entire National Football League. That is going to stand true again for both of those. Well, actually, for at least the Cleveland Browns, because I know the Eagles, they don't really have too many tight ends on roster right now because they're all hurt. But again, I do think that Austin Hooper should be a pretty valuable pickup and play going forward. Gerald Everett is my number 3. Again, Tyler Higbee's disappeared. Maybe, in fact, if something is to happen to one of their offensive pieces, they can get more utilization out of 12 personnel. But, as of right now, it just seems like Gerald Everett is the receiving tight end. In the last couple weeks, similar to an Austin Hooper, has gotten a significant amount of targets, 22 targets in the past 4 weeks, has scored multiple touchdowns, had some big target games, in which 9 just this past week, the last time that they played in week 8, had himself 9 targets. I think that is a sign that's going to continue to go in the right direction. Again, plays against Seattle. He has played pretty well against Seattle in his career. And I think, again, they want to go ahead, the Los Angeles Rams, in fact, want to go ahead and utilize as many offensive pieces as they have. Because, to be honest, outside of Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, there isn't much consistency. We're seeing more and more Josh Reynolds, but more and more Gerald Everett as well. Because, again, these negative game scripts are forcing them to pass as much as they are. Moving on to a player that we've talked about multiple times this year and really had his best game of the season. Scoring 2 touchdowns on 2 catches, 4 total targets and 10 yards. Irv Smith Jr., the question is, can he find relevant, consistent value? I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think that the Chicago matchup this upcoming week is a favorable one. Again, Jonnu Smith ended up scoring against them because when all else fails, Chicago is good at stopping the run and they're good at covering wide receivers. Not A.J. Brown kind of wide receivers, Corey Davis kind of wide receivers. But that being said, I still think there is a very good opportunity in which Irv Smith could find himself in the end zone. More utilization, more comfort with a Kirk Cousins could lead to more value. Jimmy Graham is my number 5. Again, Jimmy Graham played against the Tennessee Titans. That is one of the more favorable matchups for a tight end. Ended up scoring on 6 targets, 6 receptions, 55 receiving yards, and a touchdown. That is the first time he's had 10-plus points in a couple weeks now. It has been quite some time. I think the last time that he really had himself a big game was against Chicago. And that has been a while, to say the very least. So I don't even know why I said it like that, but it's been a while, Brian. Anyway, the whole point is they play against the Minnesota Vikings. I think it's a decent matchup. But again, of the available tight ends that are on the list, I think Jimmy Graham's owned in less than 50% of Yahoo leagues. So again, there aren't too many options. But again, Jimmy Graham, not a bad option if you need a streaming option this upcoming week. Jordan Reed is the last option that I wanted to specifically mention because Ross Dwelley, not really going to be able to pull it. I think Jordan Reed, now that he has gotten another week under his belt off of the injured reserve, he's going to fill into that George Kittle role. And playing against the Saints, again, the Saints give up, top 5 points to opposing tight ends this season, could end up putting up a number on them. If, in fact, Nick Mullins is able to get him the ball, of course. Moving on to our quarterbacks. We're talking about streaming quarterbacks and quarterbacks that potentially you should pick up because, again, maybe they were dropped this past week. We're going to mention some players, of course, that were on bye week. Specifically, number 1, Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow is available, pick him up. Please, please, please get him on your roster because his upcoming schedule is beautiful. I'm not talking about week 10 against Pittsburgh because that definitely is going to be a tough one because when Joe Burrow has played against top-tier AFC teams like Baltimore and Indianapolis, he has not thrown a single passing touchdown against them. Pittsburgh, obviously, in their secondary has the biggest issue, but it's going to be a matter of protecting Burrow. The games that I'm talking about for Burrow is after Pittsburgh, playing against the Washington football team, the New York Giants, the Miami Dolphins, and the Dallas Cowboys. Those are the ones that I want, and that is why I'm mentioning Joe Burrow here. Carson Wentz, again, another one of these quarterbacks that has found consistency, just came off the bye, and is going to be more and more utilized in this offense with more and more pieces coming back. We will see him not only consistently stay on this streak of where he's had 6 consecutive games of 2+ touchdowns, but he can maybe increase that to 3 as the games get easier. Again, he plays against his division multiple times coming up, playing against the New York Giants this upcoming week, in which he just played against 2 weeks back and played well against. So again, there is an option for Carson Wentz. We want to make sure we name these two guys because they are two of my favorite in the back end of the season. Teddy Bridgewater had himself an incredible game. 310 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 19 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs. Takes on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense does not turn it around, Teddy Bridgewater's coming into town and definitely, kicking ass and taking names, to say the very least. I really do think that there is a good chance that Teddy Bridgewater, if in fact Christian McCaffrey's healthy, it'll make it easier. But with the way that this offense has been functioning, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, and of course, Curtis Samuel as of late, I think there's a very good chance that Teddy Bridgewater stays on this consistent path. He is my number 3 quarterback on the week. We have ourselves Drew Lock as our number 4, our time stone from this past week. Again, Drew Lock has found himself a lot of garbage time. 313 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 47 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown. Plays against the Las Vegas Raiders again. The Raiders' defense is good to an extent. They are always going to have holes in their secondary. Their pass rush is probably their best part of their defense with Max Crosby coming off the edge, really causing havoc. But that being said, I still think that Drew Lock could be in line for some late game heroics and find himself some relevant garbage time value. Tua Tagovailoa is going to be our number 5. So here's the question. What is Tua going to be capable of? Beating the Arizona Cardinals and beating the Los Angeles Rams, 2 teams that have 5 wins, is a feat that, sure, the defense helped him out a lot, but Tua played well this past week. 248 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Preston Williams goes down with an injury, still has himself 35 rushing yards, gives him extra value, takes on the Los Angeles Chargers, who are a living nightmare. They are a train wreck, not only waiting to happen, but is currently happening, and the pileup is beginning to build. This team is going in the wrong direction really fast. Defensively, they can't stop a soul. Tua, if he has the weapons, could definitely be of value this week as my number 5. Jared Goff, my number 6. I think, again, if you are desperate enough to play Jared Goff, then fine. At this point, it's a matter of, do you really need to play Jared Goff? There might be other players out there that you can just go ahead, snag them, and you're good to go. Maybe Phillip Rivers against, the Tennessee defense is not a bad option. But again, I think Jared Goff typically has played well against the Seattle Seahawks. That secondary is really, really bad right now. They let, Josh Allen throw for 411 passing yards yesterday. They could not stop Josh Allen. I think if Jared Goff comes out and builds a little bit of consistency and confidence, could have himself some value. Now, the last thing that I wanted to mention on today's episode is 6 waiver wire defenses that you could potentially pick up if, in fact, available in your league. And I think these are pretty decent streaming options. The Saints are my number 1. Again, the New Orleans Saints had an incredible game last night. I mean, they couldn't really be stopped by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Defensively, Brady was getting hit the entire time. There was just too much pressure, and they were causing a lot of turnovers. The question is going to be, okay, if in fact they're playing against the San Francisco 49ers, the 49ers might not have Trent Williams again. They might not have their starting quarterback, tight end, wide receivers, running backs. This could be a one-sided affair, and it could be one that blows up really badly in the 49ers' face. So again, not a bad streaming option. If anybody in your league drops the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think they're an automatic pickup. I think playing against Carolina, there's going to be a revenge game happening. You can't get smacked on national television 38-3 and come back worse. I think that's the lowest of lows. I think that's a reality check. You look yourself in the mirror, and that defense is coming out with Todd Bowles, and they're sending a lot of blitz packages at Teddy Bridgewater. They blew him up earlier this season. I think there's a chance they do it again. Yeah, the Eagles, I mean, what are we talking about? The Eagles are going to play against Daniel Dimes. Of course, he likes to make some mistakes, turn over the ball. They played him against them a couple weeks back, put up like 9 fantasy points. I think that's a great defensive pickup and play. They'll play against them again. They're very familiar with each other. So I think, again, we could see the Eagles kind of figure it out and put up some pretty good numbers. Number 4 is the Green Bay Packers. I mean, here's the thing. The Green Bay Packers, they take on Jake Luton. Is that something that I'm interested in? Yes, to an extent. If, in fact, this defense can stop the run and, of course, rush the passer. If, in fact, the Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith combo can rush the passer, then we're going to find some success there. And, of course, he's going to turn over the ball because he's an inexperienced 6th-round pick out of Oregon State. Luton played well, but I think the Green Bay Packers defense could get after him. The Miami Dolphins have been scoring in bunches defensively, and even though they gave up 31 points, to the Arizona Cardinals offense, they were still a relevant defense. So again, they're forcing turnovers, scoring defensive touchdowns, not a bad option this upcoming week. I think the Minnesota Vikings playing against the Chicago Bears offense is not a bad option either. I know the Vikings defense is awful, and they don't have corners, but if they get any semblance of them back this week, there could be a chance in which Nick Foles makes some mistakes and turnovers the ball. And again, without a running game, if David Montgomery's out, could be a one-sided affair. So those are some waiver wire targets. Those are my Week 10 defensive waiver wire targets. But again, ultimately, these are players that I think not only could be picked up this week, but could help you throughout the remainder of the season. We've got, 7 weeks left, 7 games left until we finish the fantasy football season in week 16. I want to thank all of you for watching, supporting the channel. Again, if you haven't yet already, subscribe, click the like button down below. Really does make a huge difference in terms of algorithm and helping out the channel. So I really do appreciate that. Make sure you guys check out the link down in the description of our Discord server for those of you who are interested. I really do appreciate it. Tomorrow we'll talk about running back rankings. And until then, enjoy Monday night game. I don't think it's one of the better games, to say the very least. The Jets versus the Patriots. Maybe the Patriots cover the spread. Hopefully that's the case. But let's see Cam try to figure it out and perform well. I hope Crowder plays well for many of you, and hopefully he's active. Either way, thank you everybody for watching. And until tomorrow, I'll see you guys. Peace.